powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome back to returning listeners and welcome to new listeners. This is 1 year on. I'm Alison, and following on from episode 2, today's episode is about the first few days at home and realising this was more than just needing a few days at home. I came to realise that I had no thoughts in my head. That terrified me because I usually have a million things running through my mind at once, and every situation I'm considering, every option all at once. I could see that this recuperation was going to take a long time. I remember sitting in front of my coffee table and wondering, would I ever work again? Because things were so difficult. What did it mean to be a stroke victim or a stroke survivor? How would I ever cope? What things did I have to do now, and how would it affect me? How would I ever recover? Coming home from hospital, I felt vulnerable, yet I looked exactly the same. This was an invisible illness, one that no one could see, but which was affecting me hugely. My kids didn't know what to say. My husband didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. I think I was completely numb. Andrew said several months later that I was numb for the first few weeks. I sat on the couch in the front room just staring into space. It was really, really strange. I was still able to speak, still able to walk, still able to look after myself, but I was definitely different. I went to see the GP the day after I'd come home from the hospital. Andrew had phoned the clinic actually from the hospital to get me an appointment. Thankfully, they had an appointment available, but it just wasn't my usual GP, but one that he'd seen himself and liked. He took me there. I wasn't allowed to drive myself, and I sat in front of this divine human who said all the right things. She really did make me feel better. I would need to have a lot of time off work. She would write a medical note for me that would cover this time, and she wanted me to consider what my return to work would look like. She checked all the medications I'd been given from the hospital, wrote repeat prescriptions. There were 2 blood pressure medications, some blood thinners, and a statin. We spoke about the heart bug and how it would be helpful to know what was happening with my heart. I knew that the speech was a problem, so I phoned up the speech pathology office. Even making a phone call was hard. What did I say to them? If the conversation would go the way I was expecting, that was a bit easier. But when things didn't go the way I was expecting, and I had to think really carefully about things, that was very difficult. My speech became staccato, and I had to speak much slower. The hospital had told me that speech pathology was available through the public system, but the wait time would be very long. Incidentally, it took over 3 months for them to call me. The speech pathology office that I did call told me that I had to have a speech assessment before speech therapy sessions could begin, and there was a waiting list as there were no appointments for them. The soonest one was a month away. I left my details for a cancellation. This assessment would see what was happening with my speech, what I could and couldn't do, and they would then be better able to work out what they could do for me. Using the phone was extremely difficult. I remember sending messages very slowly to people. It took a lot of effort to write a message to people from my work, to friends and family overseas. There were many people wanting to know was I okay, and were very shocked to hear what had happened. I found myself repeating the same information over and over. And very slow messages, not at all like me. But messages were easier than phone calls, and easier than having people around to the house. I had time to consider what to write. Strange things were happening too. When I got back the ability to think, I would think one word and write another. What on earth is that? That still happens, actually, and freaks me out a bit. As an aside, my dad used to call me RSI because I would be typing and sending messages so quickly. There was a time when I could sustain a conversation in message form with 3 people at once, and I would go from one to the other, knowing exactly who was saying what, and those conversations would be so easy. Not now. Now it was so hard. I felt like I was walking through molasses with weights around every bit of me. Coordination wasn't an issue. It was almost as if my brain was telling my arms, though, the wrong thing. Maybe coordination was an issue. I don't really know how this all works, but I definitely had a huge problem with using my mobile phone. So attached to it, though. It's never far away from me. It's the life of a communications person. Communication is your life. It's intrinsic to who you are. Is it your identity? Maybe. And it's the reality of your life. Communication is key, and this enabled me to have contact with the world. I'd lost my ability to go places on my own driving, so I had to communicate with people in different ways, and for how long I didn't know at this point. I also wanted to put an out of office onto my work email, and I had to log in from home to the server. Oh my goodness, it only took me how many attempts to get my work laptop open? That was one password, maybe two. And then remote access, which I had to go through, was using another platform, and a password which I knew and could easily remember before the stroke seemed impossible now. I struggled to firstly remember it, and then secondly to type it. Oh gee whiz, memory, which was usually my strong point, no longer was. That was something I would struggle with so much, but that's another story for another day. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this, please like, share and subscribe. I will be back next time to describe my speech assessment and how confronting it actually was, and how Mr. Darcy accompanied me in the first few weeks.